Another week and more Final Fantasy Tactics news have come and gone, and today we're going to be talking about everything that we have learned due to the most recent PAX West panel featuring Ben Starr as the officiator, some new interesting little tidbits from director My Hero from some recent interviews, and a couple of extra details that I've pulled from the About Features page that we talked about in the previous video. There's a lot to go over here, including, is that a new intro? Roll it! Hello everyone, my name is Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman, and if you enjoy what I do, including my ongoing coverage of Final Fantasy Tactics, the Ivalice Chronicles, leading up to its release in less than a month at time of recording, which is insane, then a like on this video and a subscription to the channel would be very much appreciated. Thank you so much. Also, as a quick shout out, huge props to all of my channel supporters via my YouTube memberships and my patrons. They're part of what makes this channel functional and sustainable through the ups and downs of managing things with YouTube, ad rev, and all the like. And they get a special benefit, which is going to be very relevant to all of you very soon. If you're not aware, every time a new game comes out that I'm going to be playing on the channel, where we can actually have custom characters for a campaign, I put it up to you guys to be able to submit custom characters that you would like to have in the campaign that I then have to use. It makes it a little bit more interesting, a little bit more fun, because at the end of the day, it's a lot more engaging when your guy is laying on the floor with one life remaining, and I may or may not be able to get there with a Phoenix down, you know? This is something that is open to everyone to submit. However, I do like to give my channel supporters immediate priority access as a little bit of a thank you for the support that you show the channel over the years. So if that's something that you think you'll be interested in for the upcoming FFT, the Ivalice Chronicles, you can find the information that you need in the links for my memberships and my Patreon in the description. Thank you to all of you who have been supporting the channel all these years, and anyone who chooses to do so going forward. It means the most. With that quick shout out of the way, what is it that we're going to be talking about today? Well, first of all, you probably noticed we have some new footage courtesy of that PAX West panel interview thing that happened at time of recording just last night. The panel in full has been posted on Square's official accounts. I'll have it linked in the description if you haven't seen it and you'd like to watch it. There's not a ton of new information, a couple little things that we'll pick out and discuss here, but it was definitely an interesting watch just to kind of get a feel for the team's passion and also, you know, the humor from Ben Starr, who's always a pleasure to see on stage, as well as him reading some of Dysadark's lines live, which is pretty cool. Just as a fan of the franchise and of the series, it's definitely worth a watch. The star of the show was, of course, the reveal of the brand new GameStar intro movie that we've seen little snippets of here and there throughout the promotional material, but which they showed us in full for the first time, and it is so nice. I'm not going to play it here in its entirety because, you know, copyright and all that type of fun stuff, but we'll definitely be using the footage in the background. It's a beautiful new animation with, I think, redone music as well. It certainly sounds upscaled at the very least. And I'm curious what you guys feel is the best version of this intro scene with Delita and the lads sprinting across the fields and the plains on their chocobos. We've had different versions across all the different releases of FFT at this point, and I gotta say, this one definitely feels the most dynamic, but I also feel like it might be a little bit missing in terms of Delita not casually strolling through ruined cities and churches and kind of getting a feel for what's happened to Ivalice over the years. But we'll see how it fits the overall mood of the game once it drops. However, that's not the only interesting new piece of information to come from that PAX West panel. First of all, there was some discussion around the fact that you no longer have to lock in your move before you can take other actions as you had to in previous versions of the game. And I know this is a feature that a lot of people, myself included, kind of really enjoy as an artifact of its time, but I know anyone who's tried to play the game more recently, such as my girlfriend Jane when she played War of the Lions last year, was very confused about the fact that she had to lock in a move before she could then look and see like what ranges she would have, what things she'd be able to hit, if there was going to be issues with height disparities, things like that. Not being able to check those things before you move is definitely a frustrating element of the tactics of FFT, and I'm not surprised that it's getting changed here. So, how it will now work is like pretty much any other tactics game you've probably ever played in the last 20 years, wherein you can move a character forward, look at all of your options for attacks, spells, abilities, etc. And then if for some reason either you miscalculated and you're just not in range, or maybe there's a terrain feature in the way that you didn't think would be a problem, that type of fun stuff, you can go back to the beginning of your character's turn and move to a different location. This is not some sort of like turn wheel mechanic or chariot mechanic where you can go back multiple turns into the battle. Not what we're talking about here. This is just for an individual character's turn. If you don't like what their options are going to be once you move them to a particular position, you can pull them back, put them in a different position, and hopefully execute a more tactically sound strategy. Definitely a nice quality of life feature. I can see it being something that some old heads complain about, but I think overall for the majority of the player base, this is going to be a positive change. We also saw a bit more of the evolved lighting system for the game, something that I've talked about here on the channel, and other folks like Coffee Potato have also discussed, how there's very dynamic, moody lighting in certain, well, pretty much actually all scenes that we've seen, but certain places like inside Orban Monastery, for example, has a much darker, more oppressive lighting to it that really drives home the fact this is a big stone building lit by torches, right? And now we've actually gotten footage from the very first Lucavi battle versus Cuchulainn, and we see that there's very dramatic lighting here, almost too dramatic. I was pretty surprised when I saw this, but we can actually see that the entire fight is bathed in this like hellish red filter that I'm sure is definitely meant to evoke a very evil spirits are doing things. This is a possession. This is dark, foul magics, demonic things kind of feeling from the player, but it kind of looks a little too red to me personally. You know, of course, we'll have to see how it actually looks on screen natively when we're playing the game. But right now, from this little snippet of the panel, I'm not a huge fan of this choice for this scene in particular. I've loved all the rest of the lighting that we've seen thus far, but this is a little much, it feels like. Everything just feels like it's been bathed in cranberry juice. I don't know, it's just odd. We'll have to see how it actually feels, but as far as this one is concerned, it's not my favorite, and I'm hoping that this is either just like a one-off thing, or there's at least other colors or types of lighting for the other Lucavi battles. Because I mean, even the side-by-side that they show here in the panel, I much prefer the original look, because you can actually get a feel for the kind of sickly gray mottled skin that Cuchulainn has. You don't really get that in this new version. So let me know your thoughts about this lighting choice here. Probably the first time that I felt not great about it myself, but again, we'll have to see, and I'm curious to hear what your guys' thoughts are as well. Now, beyond some funny anecdotes and little discussions about what the developers' favorite moments from the new game are, who their favorite characters are, things that have really kind of been discussed before, those are the major important strokes for this new PAX West panel. However, it is not the only new piece of information that we've got since my last video. There was a recent interview with the director and co-director of the Ivalice Chronicles project, where they were discussing some small changes to the game that they felt were important. Now, full disclosure, I don't know where exactly this interview came from, so huge shout out to J7 Jace for posting it, as I couldn't find it, and he was the first one to have it up as far as I'm aware, so full shout out to him. People were actually in the comments of my previous video being like, oh, look at this new video that Jace posted, there's like actually new information here, all that sorts of cool stuff. So I totally missed it. Huge props to you, but I do want to cover the information discussed here because I do feel that it's important. In this little interview, they talk about changes to poaching, changes to stats, and the most interesting information, and the information that they go into the most depth with, are finally some notes about the changes for Cloud, something we've been very curious about ever since it was first discussed that they were changing how he would be placed in the Ivalice Chronicles. As far as the poaching changes are concerned, they don't really go into detail of what is changing, but it was discussed by Ayako Yokoyama, the co-director, that she felt that the poaching system was a little kind of obtuse and hard to understand, and so she wanted to make changes to make it flow a little bit better. Now, on its face, that seems like kind of a silly statement, because poaching is pretty simple. You equip poach, you kill a monster, you poach it. You go to a monster tamer shop, you buy whatever item, if you want, that was poached from that monster. Very straightforward. I'm assuming what they're talking about here is giving you more information about what you can actually poach from monsters, so you can more directly hunt stuff and go out of your way to go after a particular monster if you know that it could drop a rare item. If that is the case, I don't know exactly how it could potentially manifest. Maybe if you have a character with Poach equipped in a battle, you'll have like a special menu section in a monster stat screen that shows like it could become this item, or this item, right? So you know like, oh, it would actually be worth it for me to run this thief who has Poach over here and try to poach this dragon and I could get something cool, right? Because otherwise, it's one of those things where you just play a guessing game or have a guide open the entire time that you're playing and just bring someone with Poach with you everywhere in the hopes that maybe you'll eventually get something cool from a monster, which is fun when it happens, but it's not very tactical. It's not very interesting from a trying to get your team built up standpoint. It's more just another type of grind. And grinds are fun, but at the very least, if I'm going to grind for something, I'd rather know what it is that I'm grinding for, at least have that insight. So we'll have to see exactly what's being changed here, but it is interesting that they thought about poaching and trying to make it a little bit more of an integrated system instead of kind of a side thing as it is in the previous versions of the game. They also discussed how they're changing various stats for different characters and classes. Again, they didn't go into any major details here. However, if we go over to that enhanced and classic features page that we've looked at previously on the Japanese site for Square Enix, one of the things that I did notice is that they called out a few of the different job abilities that are getting tweaks. Some of these like Charge and Mantra we already knew about, but they also call out Summon Magic, Hard Sword, which is the Divine Knight ability, and the amount of job points that are obtained alongside other potential changes. So there are quite a few tweaks and modifications being made beyond just some of the really problematic outliers like Archers and then, Rafa and Merrick. Personally, I'm very excited to see how these changes go into effect. I've always been fairly low on summoners beyond just the wow, it's so cool factor from when I was a little kid, something that's reflected in my tier list and which I catch a lot of flack for, but I do think that it is something that needed to be buffed, and I'll be excited to see exactly what changes that entails. As far as the Divine Knight abilities are concerned, I imagine that's probably going to be something along the lines of what they did for War of the Lions, where if you hit something that doesn't have gear or a slot that doesn't have a piece of gear in it, like if you're fighting a monster or something that you already broke a piece of gear for and you hit that same spot again with your Divine Knight, that you deal more damage rather than the ability just completely whiffing, which always felt awful. If it's anything other than that, I'm certainly interested to hear it, but I would not be surprised if it was just using the War of the Lions version. Finally, and definitely the most interesting piece of information from this interview is that insight into what's happening with Cloud. We haven't gotten a ton of new information here, but we do know from previous discussions that he joins much earlier in the game, and we now know that he actually does come equipped with his Materia Blade, so we'll be able to start using his abilities right off the bat. We've also heard implications that his actual functionality and like stats and skills have been buffed as well, so it's very possible that Cloud's going to become a very powerful character right from the get-go for you. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, what does that mean for Mount Bervenia? Because you had to go to Mount Bervenia near the end of the game, have a character with a really high jump and find item, climb to the top of the volcano, and then you would get the Materia Blade, so you could actually use Cloud's skills. What's there now? Well, apparently it's something different, and the directors were saying that they're excited for people to go and find it because apparently it's a pretty cool weapon. I would assume it's probably going to be something from Final Fantasy VII, maybe to help promote the Reborn remake series that they're doing with the Final Fantasy VII trilogy. Maybe it's going to be a Sephiroth weapon like the Masamune, maybe it'll be Ultima weapon or something along those lines. Whatever it is, I'm hoping it's something that Cloud can use that still allows him to use his limit break abilities and is just a more powerful version of the Materia Blade, because that was always one of his issues. The Materia Blade just sucked, which meant that his damage output was never going to be as good as it could have been unless you gave him dual wield so you could have an actual good sword and also the Materia Blade to enable his abilities. It was just awkward. So it's really cool that they've actually thought about how they can make the original experience still kind of there with climbing Mount Bervenia to find a weapon or an item, while also making Cloud much more functional. And it's nice that we have a little bit more insight into how that's going to work now. And finally, the last piece of info I want to pluck from that features page on the Japanese Square Enix site is a little bit more discussion about the ability sets that we have talked about previously. We had noted how there was actually the option to save a set or a battle set for each individual character, and I figured this probably meant that you could save loadouts for your guys that you'd be able to swap between for different fights with different terrain, etc. And we now have confirmation that that is exactly what that is. Specifically, you'll be able to save up to 3 job, ability, and equipment combinations for each unit that can be easily switched during the battle formation screen when you enter a fight. So you can very easily swap around if you have different loadouts that you would like for different types of terrain, different battle types, different party formations, etc. This is such an awesome thing. The fact that it actually saves not only your abilities, but your gear, and you can have 3 different loadouts. Like, dude, I'm so ready to get my Samurai Ramza, my Geomancer Ramza, and like some weird like Squire grind build or something, and have all of them set, all of them ready to go and swappable at a whim. It's such a nice quality of life change, and I'm so happy to see that we have that much room to work with for each character. That's so many different possibilities. It's awesome. I love it. That said, though, that is all of the new information that I have been able to find thus far about the release of Final Fantasy Tactics: The Ivalice Chronicles. As always, if there's anything that I missed, do please let me know in the comments, such as that new interview that J7Jace was talking about. Super cool. I totally would have missed that. Check out his video on that. I'll have that linked in the description as well. Thank you to him for covering that. And it's very possible that we're going to get even more information in the coming weeks as we get closer and closer to the release of the game. Once again, thank you to my channel supporters, both new and old. You guys are absolutely what helps keep things running around here and gives me a little bit of stability in the ever-changing landscape that is YouTube. You can see all of those names scrolling by on the right-hand side of the screen right now. Let's see some good discussion about all of the news and changes and everything else that we've had here. What do you feel about the lighting system? What do you think about the new intro movie? I'd like to have a nice little conversation with each and every one of you in the comments, so I hope to see you all there. Until the next one, though, my name has been Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman. I hope you all have a good night. Stay safe and healthy out there, everyone. And remember, be good to each other. Bye now.